Okay guys, I'm gonna do another video about cosmic justice to see if I can do a better job of explaining it, because what I've been getting at is what's the problem to be solved by the atonement. And Alex's graphic he sent over a couple weeks ago or a week ago or whatever, is asking, it said, is it God's wrath or is it something wrong inside of us? And I went through this whole thing about how it's something inside of us and how we're not ready for God's glory. So God's trying to solve that problem between us and God's glory. But there's another part of this, okay? And this will help explain the redemption language and the ransom language in the scriptures. I've already talked about it, but I'm going to try to give it a better answer. Okay, and it's the waters of chaos at the beginning of creation. So here we are, here's the waters of chaos, right? And the Spirit of God was hovering over it. I'm going to just pretend like, the Spirit of God is invisible, okay? So you don't see anything there. And there was darkness upon the face of the deep, right? So I'm going to, do a little dark. I mean, it's hard to tell the difference between the darkness and the waters, right? But anyway, okay. So what I have said is that this stuff is eternal, right? And that's Joseph Smith taught that, and that's in our Doctrine and Covenants. And that the stuff that the world is made out of has always existed, that God didn't make it. Now, everyone in the world thought this about God, even the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament, until the 2nd century AD. In the 2nd century AD, you started to get people starting to move towards creation out of nothing. And what they mean by that is that God made this stuff in the beginning. So he snapped the fingers or whatever, spoke, and this stuff came into being. Whereas the view before that point in time was this stuff had always been in being and God used it to form or organize the earth. And this happened in the 2nd century AD because people were trying to protect God's honor. They were trying to say he's not like the pagan gods, because the pagan gods also had eternal stuff that they made the world out of. Everyone thought this way. Jew, Christian, pagan alike, okay? The old way. And then in the 2nd century AD, you get, early church fathers starting to say, that God made everything out of nothing. And what they're trying to do is exalt God above pagan ideas, because if there's stuff that already exists, that's why you have stories in like the pagan stories about even the gods of the pagans like Zeus and those guys are, fate is stronger than them, right? Like there's some aspect of reality that contains them that they have to abide by. And in Greek stories they would call it fate or something like that. And so the early Christian fathers who were Greeks, you're starting to get this Greek influx into the early church because the Jews had rejected it, and they were trying to just, and they get into these philosophical battles with other Greeks and Romans and stuff, and and when I say they're Greeks, they're like, they're from the Greco-Roman world, they're Gentiles. I don't know that they're actually Greek, but anyway, that's their cultural heritage. And they get into these philosophical discussions and they're trying to say, oh, well, our God is better than your gods because he even made the stuff out of which the earth was made, and he's not bound by any fate or any rule. He made up all the rules, okay? So that's where they went with it. And so then, but now that move causes a bunch of problems, okay? And these are actually issues that I struggled with and wondered about. And I'm going to just tell you about an example that like perfectly encapsulates it. I was in a philosophy of religion class at Yale, and in that class there were a bunch of Christian kids and then there were a bunch of atheist kids. And the atheist kids, were just hammering the Christian kids over this very issue right here, creation out of nothing. Because we were talking about the problem of evil. And the problem of evil is like, why is there anything bad even? Like, bad, why is there bad that humans cause, or even like natural disasters, animal suffering, whatever it is, like, why is there anything wrong with the world if God is good? If the Christian God or the Jewish God is ultimately good, then why did he make a world where there's even the possibility of evil? And there's a couple of and evil in the broadest sense, meaning bad things. Okay, why is there anything bad? And the Christian responses are ones that you're used to. It's like, well, without it, you can't have any real agency. You have to have something to choose between. You can't learn anything without bad stuff. Like all the answers we have, all Christians have those same answers. Okay. But the problem is that those atheist kids in that class, I remember specifically this one kid, he sat at the head of the table. He was like super aggressive, kind of obnoxious, but he was super smart. And he said, he says, well, why not make it however you want? If he can create out of nothing, why not give you agency, plus no sin, plus no pain, plus no opposition? Why can't it be you have agency and there's never a sin and there's never any pain, and you can still learn and you can still have all the happiness you would have from having pain and sorrow and opposition? And he's like, if he can do whatever he wants, if he can create out of nothing, then why can't he do that? This logic that you have about it enables agency and it enables growth and learning, that only works if that's kind of the way the universe works, is basically what he was saying. That only works if there's a rule that God didn't make up that means that's the way it has to be. Whereas if God can make up all the rules and make up all the matter and do everything, then why didn't he just make the rules so that you can have both? You can have your cake and eat it too. You can have both agency and learn your lessons and be happy without sin and opposition and everything. And that doesn't make any sense to us because it contradicts kind of our logic. But his point was, why is God bound by human logic, right? You could also say, why is there even any hell? Like, if this God is so good, why would he make the world and then set up these arbitrary rules he made up that says, and if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then I'm going to send you to hell? It's like, why would you even do that if you're a good being? Why not just make it so everybody is happy all the time and gets to learn lessons and have all the benefits of the bad stuff? Like, all the things that you guys say come from all the bad stuff. Why can't he just give you the good stuff and all those benefits without all the bad stuff? And then you can even say, why anything at all, right? Like, because if you really go down this path, it starts to set up this picture of like, if God really did make everything out of nothing, this world is pretty arbitrary. I mean, the rules, he made up the matter, he made up the rules, he made up everything, and there's a lot of suffering, and most of us don't make it according to the traditional interpretation of Christianity. Most people end up burning in hell, either forever or being annihilated, and only a handful of people are saved, and that feels really random, like who gets saved. It's like, were you born in Western Europe during the modern era, basically? Because if you live in China or India, you were just happened to be born there, which God is the one that determined that, because he made up everything. He made up all the rules. If he's the one that determines all that, then he's the one that also means, set it up so that you would fail. Okay? So that's the problem of creation out of nothing. Okay? Now, on the flip side, the problem if you go back to this worldview, creation out of something, is, well, then does that limit God? Does that mean that God can't save me? Okay, does that mean that God isn't as powerful as I thought he was? That's the problem with this one. So I'm setting up the problem, and I got to go to a kid basketball game. So I'm going to pause the video, and then I'll come back and try to answer it. But this is the problem that I'm going to try to solve, and I'll do a better job of explaining why that feeds into the atonement and everything I've been talking about.